Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is entitled Sparx. Yes, Sparx. So this is back in my day at the Wiz. We're talking very late 90s. We'll call it 1998 or so. Maybe 99. Somewhere in there. And I was in the home office department, which sold computers and calculators and cell phones and personal organizers, cordless phones, answering machines, you name it. That kind of office-y stuff, fax machines, that kind of stuff. Anyway, there I was, and we had this guy who worked over on the other side of the store who was named Steve. His name was Steve Sparx. But for short, we called him Steve Sparx. The way this sort of came about was we had different registers in the store, and occasionally they would open up another register. I guess business was picking up or something like that. Or not even at the point. It was just in there. And when you would ring up a sale, you would get his ID number, however that worked back in the day, whatever the numbers were. We had whatever numbers, and he came up to me, and we had these sales slips that you'd write your ID on, and what the item was, the price, especially the price, because of the Wiz, you could haggle certain times for certain things. Steve Sparx, the salesman would be printed, the name would be printed out on the receipt. So that way the customer had a record of who they spoke to. And of course that was in the system, not that you could look any of this up, but it was there. Anyways, that was all there. And depending on the register you went to, the data was stored locally on that machine within the POS program. At night, after the store closed, the main headquarters, wherever that was, would call up, get ready, by dial-up modem, connect to the store's mainframe, don't know exactly how this worked, or main terminal, and somehow would be able to talk to all of the other registers in the store and download all of the transactions by telephone line, because it took a long time. But like I said, if the salesperson was unknown, then a manager had to come over, log in, and enter the user ID and type in their actual name. So because he was known as Steve Sparx, on certain registers you'd ring it up and it would say Steve Sparx, others would say Steven Sparx, and others would just say Steve Sparx. So it was stored locally depending on what register you were on. So that was an interesting little tidbit there. He was a nice guy, but nervous as hell. He worked over with the TVs and VCRs and stuff like that. We were selling CRTs in these days, but you'd sell projection, rear projection TVs and stuff like that back in the day, and those were the big ticket items. So these guys in the video department had some big numbers coming through the register. Well, what happens when you go to the store and you don't have money to pay for that? We had a Wiz card. And yes, there were deals where there was, X amount of months no interest or whatever it is, 10% off. I don't know what the fuck it was. And we had this hokey fucking shit to hook this up. We would process the applications ourselves as salespeople. And on the main side of the store, they had a system set up just for processing Wiz cards. And over on the home office side where I was, we had a separate system set up just for doing Wiz cards. Well, Steve has this big sale on the line, and the customer wanted the Wiz card, and Steve is like really nervous about this because he went over to the Wiz card machine on his side of the store and it wasn't working that day. No idea what the problem was. Out of my hands. So he said, I'm having problems. Let me go to the other side where we have another machine. I can try processing it there. Just please be patient. I'll do my best for you, whatever. So, anyways, Steve comes over. He's like, I need to use your whiz card machine. Yeah, Steve, no problem. It's right over here. So he goes and he punches in the customer's information, and he's nervous as hell because this was the kind of guy he was. And let me tell you the kind of guy he was. He was the kind of guy that did all the drugs in the 60s, and he was jittery and fucked up from it. And he was still stuck in the 60s because he had like probably a late 70s Corvette. And that was his daily driver. And every now and again, he'd have to bring that in for a tune-up or something like that. And I remember him talking about it. And it was a nice car. It wasn't in the greatest of shape, but it wasn't all beat to hell. But that was his daily driver because that was the kind of car, if you grew up in the 60s, that you'd be driving in the 70s. Was it his first car? I don't think so, but whatever, that was his car. That was his deal. And he was still stuck in the 60s. Well, anyways, there he is, and he's punching in all the information to the system for the whiz card, and then you would hit submit. And then, like everything else in the store, it would dial up by modem and talk to the appropriate bank institution with the customer's social security number, and it would have to run a credit check. And this could take a good 2 minutes before you might get a response. Sometimes it was as quick as like 20-30 seconds, but sometimes it took a bit longer. Maybe somebody had to actually verify this, a person on the other end, look at it and say, yeah, I guess we can approve this guy. Something. I don't know exactly how it worked. It was a lot of hocus pocus. But anyway, he puts this thing in, and he hits submit, and the thing dials up, and he crosses his fingers that it's going to work. And he's like, man, I hope this is like a $5,000 sale. Oh, this is going to be great if this shit goes through. I know this guy, though. This shit isn't going to go through. And he's all like nervous and shit about it. He said, I'm just fucking waiting. I'm just waiting. This shit is going to come back declined. Every TV in the store is going to come up with the big Family Feud. And he did this with his arms. I will never forget that. That was the greatest shit. Anyway, I think it actually did get approved, and he went back and he made his sale, and that was that. One other thing with him. I just have my little paper here just to refer to, jog my memory. We had at one point been bought out, sold to, however you want to call it, to the local cable company, which at the time was called Cablevision. They did this as a business venture, so we would sell, and I probably explained this before, we would sell TVs and VCRs. Hey, wouldn't it be nice to have cable to hook up to that? And this was at the time when cable modems were coming on the scene, so we had all sorts of deals with that, and people were coming in. Oh, high-speed internet, I don't have to tie up my phone line. We sold computers. Hey, you want high-speed internet? We can do that for you. And we had a walk-in center in the store. People had a problem with their cable box. They could bring it in, go to the Cablevision desk, and they could test it right there and give them a new box, because they pay for service and that. It's owned by the cable company, and all this kind of crazy shit. Register a cable modem for them, all kinds of stuff that they used to do right in store. But the problem was, in these days, being late 90s, Ethernet on computers was not commonplace. Around 2000-ish, it was starting to appear on computers, but not always. As a result of that, we sold Ethernet cards, both ISA and PCI varieties. We won't talk about the difference between PCI and PCIe, of course, because PCIe didn't exist then. And yeah, they would need to know what kind of system they had, and we would generally know because there were, how old is your system? Oh, it runs Windows 95? Well, you're going to need an ISA card. And if it's not right, please bring it back. We'll exchange it for the PCI one, no problem. But we also had to demonstrate how to install this card in the machine. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And we had basically a stripped out computer that was a floor model that somebody dropped, or missing the front case of it, or I don't know what, just some turd. But it still had the motherboard and the hard drive and all the stuff in there. And it would be sitting there. And, you know, when they'd say, which card do I need? Have you looked inside your system before? Yeah. Or they looked and came back and said, I have the black slot, or I have the white slot, which would be ISA or PCI, respectively. So, anyway, that was the deal. And we had to demonstrate how to install this in the machine. I was the computer guy. And we had to pass this test administered by Cablevision? I don't know. And there were a few points they needed you to touch on. And basically the guy who was testing you would act as the customer. Say, okay, so you're all set with your cable modem. You know, we'll get all that registered for you, sir. And you leave with it today and that. And when you get home, you're going to have to install an Ethernet card in your machine. There were, by the way, cable modems a little later on that had a USB connection. That's basically as good as wireless. You didn't want to do that because a lot of machines still had USB 1.1, which would give you maximum 6 megabits per second throughput. But then again, by the same token, when your high-speed internet was 1 to maybe 3 megabits per second, there was enough bandwidth to get by. There is. I've had many videos on USB 1.1 is faster than you think. But it was, the drivers were buggy. It just, you didn't want to do it. So Ethernet was definitely the preferred option. Now, you needed your installation diskette, and computers had diskettes, and the card would come with the diskette, and all of that great stuff. And we had this system. So the guy basically said, you know, we'll pick people here. Jason. Okay. So I'm a little nervous because I need to do this for my job, and I know what I'm doing, but you're put on the spot, you know. So you get a little nervous about that. Anyways, I come up there and I said, okay, so to hook up your cable modem, you're going to need an Ethernet port on your computer. Now, take a look at this computer I have here. This is an Ethernet port. It looks like a telephone jack, but if you notice, you probably have dial-up service now. Yeah, I do. So here's the modem, and modems typically, not always, but very, very commonly, 90-something% of the time, 92.18% of the time, it would have 2 ports on the modem, because you would have your line in and your line out, which would go to the telephone that you used to have there, so it would hook in line. I said, so you're going to be looking for a port that is single like this, and if you notice, this port is larger than the regular modem port, the telephone port. So you can't go by that. You have to go by if there's 2 of them, and if you have this other one that looks like a phone jack but is larger. You don't have that. Okay, so you're going to need an Ethernet card then. Now, they're not expensive, $20, $30, something like that, and that was chump change at this point for a $200 modem. I said, okay, so inside the machine you're going to have PCI or ISA slots. Now, how old is your machine? Well, we got it about 3 years ago. It runs Windows 95. Okay, you're probably going to be using the ISA. So the ISA is this black slot here. You will have a number of them, as you see in this system here, and here is an ISA card. So what you do is on the back, there's this metal bracket, and you take the screw out, and then that bracket will pull out. We didn't have these breakaway things like we do nowadays because everything got cheap. So you take the screw out, save that screw because you're going to need it, and remove the metal plate. Now you're going to take the card, and you'll see there's a notch in it right here in the connector. See that little bridge in the connector? The notch in the card goes over the bridge, okay? So you just grab the card, and you're going to wiggle it in the slot. And you want to make sure all the little gold fingers on there are seated all the way in. And when it is, it looks just like you see here. So this was a hands-on visual demonstration teaching people how to install the cards. So needless to say, I did everything textbook. Even the instructor guy was fucking impressed. Well, anyways, here was the deal. Okay, now we're going to break for lunch. And Steve Sparx, you're next. Steve, the nervous guy, like I was explaining, he said, holy shit, what the hell am I going to do? He's fucking shaking and quivering and stuff because he had to do this to keep his job. He's like, I can't do that. What, are you kidding? This guy was perfect down to every last fucking detail. This is like having me trying to come on the Ed Sullivan Show after the Beatles. And he was shaking his shit. Man, what a great analogy. What a great fucking analogy. That was awesome. Anyways, the tester guy knew that mostly not everybody is going to be doing a job like I did. I'm just good. I'm sorry. I apologize. But that's just how the names landed, or so, I don't know what the deal was. That was it, and man, he was shaking like a leaf. But indeed, he passed. He kept his job, and the store closed, and that was the end of the whiz. And don't know whatever happened to him. Funnily, is that a word? Funnily enough, just someone in my brain said, those old managers at the Wiz, Google them. And I looked up two of my old bosses. The first guy, whose name was Lorne Friedman. Lorne. Lorne. Odd name. I looked him up, and I typed in, Lorne Friedman, the Wiz, and sure enough, here's his LinkedIn page. Oh, no shit. Click on it. It comes up. Lorne had left the Wiz at one point, and this is just a little side story. He left the Wiz at one point, and I really liked Lorne. Lorne was a great guy. He was a nice guy. He was a great manager. And at the end of the night, I was a cashier way back early on, and he would count out the drawer. The cashier would count it out, and then the manager would have to count it and verify that the count was correct. And if not, we'd both count it again. Anyway, so Steve is standing there, and the next cashier was getting their paperwork together, all the credit card receipts, and putting the Wiz card application, everything, filing everything, getting everything set, and counting their drawer out like that. So they're doing all of that stuff while Lorne is counting out my drawer. And the next cashier was another male, and he's standing there, and he's counting the drawer out, and he says, guys, I need to, well, we're all men here, and he just fucking farted a nice one. That was pretty funny. So anyway, I looked up Lorne, and here's his LinkedIn page. It turns out the guy's still around, and he went from the Wiz to the Zone. Heard of it? Forget who had this store, whether it was a spin-off of Radio Shack or Incredible Universe, which was a Radio Shack spin-off, or maybe a spin-off of Best Buy or Circuit City, or I don't know what the deal was. Basically, he's still a retail store manager, and he has his, all the places he's been at. He's been at Best Buy and stuff like that, and they had a picture of him at Best Buy standing in a crowd of salespeople there, But here's his profile picture, and I'm like, was that what Lorne looked like? I don't know. And what threw me off is he was totally bald now. He had hair when I worked with him. So that was one. And the other guy who I mentioned in a previous Old War Story, Scott Zieselman, Scott Z, which I think was in the Old War Story, Don't Say I Never Gave You Nothing. Anyway, he is still around also. I guess he had retired or something like that. Still looks pretty much the same. Found some page, maybe it was an Instagram page or something like that. You know, married, 4 kids, successful in life, something like that. He was always kind of weird that way. But anyway, he was still around. I didn't think to look up Steve Sparx or any of the other guys like that. You never know. Steve was stuck in the 60s, so for him to email somebody was a big thing. Obviously, a lot of shit changed in 20 or getting on 25 years at this point. So maybe, yeah, he's all over the shit with the smartphone and all that. Who the fuck knows? But that was the story of Sparx. Thanks for watching this installment of Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.